For God can take care of us regardless. On the individual level, on the church level, on the community level, on all levels, God can take care of us. So there has to be a different reason for God allowing us to be here and build the big churches, be all together, have, those big congregations, all these bishops, all these people throughout the whole world, not just, in one part of the world, but throughout everywhere in the world, right? And I think the reason is the picture of God is becoming more and more fainter every day. Every day there's more things that come in and makes the picture of God less clear to people on who it is. Even coming from big churches and from big preachers, right? If you're just following the news in the last, week, big mega church, preacher just resigned from a church because his behavior is not acceptable. Or what's the news coming out from, the Catholic Church and so on, all these different things that are happening around us in the world is showing that even the image of Christ is becoming fainter and fainter every day. Right? And God is looking for somebody to witness for them, somebody to keep the message and deliver the message. Not just keep the message, right? So what you said, Rafat, is absolutely correct. But it's not just keeping the message, right? If we keep the treasure for ourselves and hide it, what's the benefit of it? It doesn't have any benefit. If a flower, beautiful flower that, very beautiful, have very nice, smell, we hide it under, a big cover. What's the benefit of that? Nobody's going to benefit from it. It's the same thing with our church. We, as in the church, in the Coptic church, we need to be open. We need to deliver the message of God to people. And we need to spread the word, of who God is throughout the whole word outside. And that's my personal belief, is that's why God brought us here today. Again, not to make more money, but actually to bring God's word to people everywhere we're there, right? And as Abuna said, we are ambassadors for Christ, that God is making his appeal with us, right? To asking people to reconcile with God. تاريخ الكنيسة عندنا زي ما ابونا قال قبل كده، من أول الكنيسة القبطية بالذات، وإحنا نعتبر مدافعين عن الإيمان. من أوائل الآباء كنيسة الإسكندرية ومدرسة الإسكندرية بالذات كان دايما بتدافع عن الإيمان، وبتعرف الناس على مستوى العالم إيه هو الإيمان الصح، وإحنا بنعمل إيه، وإزاي نعبد ربنا، وإيه هو الإيمان، وإزاي نحن نعيش حياة مسيحية throughout the history. Okay, and that's the role, has been the role of the Coptic Church for centuries until we got closed on ourselves. We had to protect ourselves for a while, and we were banned from reaching out. So God right now lifted this, right? So for a while, the church was open, was all over the place. God allowed it to preserve the faith. Yes? So let's think about it this way. Our church had the faith, was teaching the faith to everybody. God kept, that, sealed it with the persecution, with everything around it for a while. And now he opened that seal and allowed it to be open again. Because we have kept the faith as is. And God right now wants us to carry that faith out that has been preserved for the last 1400 years to other people, and to preach that out and to witness for him all over the place. If you have any objections or any questions, please feel free to. So what is apologetic? And some people asked this question earlier today, so it was a good segue. What's the difference between apologetic and evangelism, right? And as Abuna said, they're intertwined, right? Evangelism to me is the first step. You go and bring people and tell them, hey, what do you know about God? What do you know about, Jesus? Let's talk. An apologetic, some of us will sit down and understand more about very specific aspects of the faith and our knowledge. It comes from 1 Peter 3:15. Sanctify the Lord God in your hearts, and be ready always to give an answer to every man that asks you for the reason of hope that's in you, with meekness and fear. So giving an answer. The original word is, let me just move this away. Apologia. That's the origin of the word from which comes apology. And it was also used in the Bible in multiple meanings as defense or as answer. So when we are saying this is an apologetic group, we're giving a defense of the faith, we're giving an apology, not that we are doing something wrong, but to explain what our faith is, giving an answer to those who are asking about the faith. So if somebody today comes and asks you, why do you believe in God? Right? Why do you believe in God? How can you say that you're a Christian while science is saying this? While everybody around you is saying that? How can we answer that? How can we give that answer? Taban, it's great and it's important to say, I know him, I experienced him, but we also have to have an answer. Otherwise, we're going to be, looked upon in our society today as people we don't know what we're doing, right? If you read in the newspapers, if you read the comments on articles in CNN, BBC, or whatever, right? Religion today is being coined with illiterate. If you're ignorant, if you don't know anything about science and about history, about anything, you can be religious. If you're a scientist, you cannot believe in God. Is such thing really acceptable or not? Right? Apologetics needs certain rules, right? It's not about us going out and yelling and screaming at people, or you think this, I think that. No, this is the right way to think, and arm twist people into believing things. St. Peter has put in the conditions of apologetics, right? Hope, right? That we have to have hope and salvation. I have to have faith and the hope myself, and have the strong understanding and the strong belief that why Christ has died for me, why I'm living this life, why do I believe in him. Meekness, again, we don't approach people, I know better than you, come and let me teach you what's right and what's wrong, right? This is not the approach for Christianity as a whole. And fear about my salvation, fear for the salvation of those people. If those people are not going to hear the message, if nobody is going to provide to them the counter argument for what the culture today is providing, they're not going to be saved. And God is going to ask us accountability. You are in this situation, you are in this environment, what have you done? How have you prepared yourself, or how have you prepared people around you to give that answer? Okay. And of course, things like let your light shine before men, and for the name of God is blasphemed. These are two contradictory things, but they also represents our behavior. So from our behavior, our attitude in society, whether we are bringing in grace to God's name or we're bringing in people blaspheming against God's name because of our attitude and our behavior. Okay. More important, as again, as Abuna said earlier today, the experience with God, the hope that's in us, right? I'm going to talk to people about God. I have to know God. I can't talk to people about something I don't know. If I didn't study engineering, for example, I can't tell people what engineering is all about. I can't go and talk about something I have no clue about and pretend to be an expert on it without studying, without understanding. Same thing about God. If I don't know who God is, I don't experience him in my life, I don't have the personal relationship, I don't pray, I don't read the Bible, I can't go and preach to people. So apologetic, first of all, is about my relationship with God, and I have to have that relationship with God first of all before I can go and approach other people about how to have a relationship with God. And the second thing is understanding what are the issues that hindering people from knowing God. Just by quick raise of hand, how many people saw the movie God is Not Dead? Okay, some of us did. Right? This is, unfortunately, the challenge in the movie God is Not Dead is when our youth enter into college, they are challenged immediately by professors and by colleagues who attack their religion, immediately, regardless of what they believe in. You believing in a God, you believing in something that you cannot see, you're not scientific. This does not exist on campus. You cannot be a Christian and a scientist at the same time. Actually, there's several universities who put a big disclaimer at the beginning, right? This department believes in evolution, for example. So if you don't believe in evolution, don't even come and talk to us, right? This is becoming dogma before anything else. So what do I understand about these things, and how can I know what's blocking people from accepting Christ? People at work, what is their issue about believing in God? Why they don't want to believe in God? Right? So what are the issues we're facing in today's world? Right? A lot of people are calling the time we're living in today is called post-Christian era. Christianity is over, khalas. Some people claim that Christianity is gone. We're done with Christianity, and now we're looking at what's after Christianity, right? The age of science, the age of reason, and all that. Everything has to be proved scientifically. I'm sure you all studied math and science and so on, and the foundations of math and science were based on Christian believers, or people who believed in God. Whether it's Newton, Einstein, Laplace, all these people, these were people who believed in God, and they were out to see how God made things. Today's attitude is, I'm going out to prove whether God exists or not, right? I think Sakharov, when he went out to space, and the first man to go out, orbit the Earth, and came back, or went to the moon, I forgot which one it is, came back and said, I did not see God. He's expecting to have physical evidence of God's existence, whether here on Earth or out in space. If I don't find that physical evidence, God does not exist. This is the environment that we're living in. This is the environment that our kids are growing up in. And this is what's required to deal with. If I'm not going to be able to address this issue head on, I'm not going to be able to bring down the barriers. Again, apologetic is not about the conversion of a person to Christianity, right? Apologetics is about lowering down the barriers that people have against God, so later on they can start having the relationship, they can start having the faith and develop the faith to God. The barrier they have now is called science. Though science can be an excellent tool to believe in God. As you know, in the Church of Alexandria, in the School of Alexandria, people were studying theology, anatomy, and astronomy, because the father of the church believed that these sciences, the anatomy and astronomy and all these things, were good things to give people an indication of how great God is and how wonderful God is. Nihilistic, basically, that means that there's no purpose in anything we do. Religion is something that man created to convince themselves with, and we have converted, created all these morality around us, but in reality, we're all gonna be born, live, and die. There's nothing after death, and we're all gonna be just gone. That's it, right? And I think some of these things go back to the advancements or the changes that happened in philosophy and science in the 19th and early 20th century. People like Darwin, who came up with the idea. By the way, idea of evolution is not new. Go back to the book of Acts, and the same concept, Epicurean concept, have been around way before Christ. And St. Paul and St. Stephen argued against the Epicurean concepts in the book of Acts. What Darwin was all, his own contribution was the natural selection, and random mutation. But the whole idea behind, everything came random way, that has been around since, Epicurean time, way before Christ. So when Darwin made that sort of, an easy way to give us an excuse for why we exist, there's no need for a creator anymore for me to exist. I can find another reason, because philosophers and scientists for the longest time have been arguing with, why do I exist? Right? And any religion have to answer these questions. Why do I exist? What's the purpose of my existence? Right? Darwin gave us an excuse for why we exist without God. Then came Freud, around the same era, and said, well, my behavior is not really related to me. My behavior is related to the environment. I am a product of my environment. Right? Guys, if you can just wait a little bit. Right? So my behavior is a result of the environment. I'm not accountable for my own behavior. my parents raised me this way. So-and-so yelled at me when I was, 5 years old, and that's why now I behave that way. So I'm not, responsible for my own behavior, right? There's no longer something called sin. It's my, environment that made me behave this way. So now there's a reason for me to exclude God from my life based on, the whole idea of evolution and so on. That's why evolution is more of a faith than it's a science, right? I am no longer responsible for my behavior because I'm just a product of, people are outside me. But of course, Freud has been changed across the history, but that still remains as a main excuse, right? And then came Friedrich Nietzsche, who said, who was a German philosopher, and basically said, religion was an invention of man, and there's religions of masters and religions of slaves and so on. This was an invention of people, so we no longer need to believe in anything and declare that the churches are the tombs of God. And now this is the era of man, and we should all, live and do what we want. So these three came together and caused people to live just to enjoy themselves because they're soon going to die, and I might as well make the best out of it, right? The same concept that St. Paul was fighting against when he was arguing for the resurrection. We are faced with a big problem as well as a multicultural environment. Which culture, which religion is right? The whole relativism, right? There is a relative morality. Hindus do it this way, Muslims do it this way, Christians do it this way, Jewish do it this way, atheists do it this way. Which ways make it right? What makes your way better than their way, right? They believe that, for thousands of years. You believe that in thousands of years. Which way is the right way, right? And people are arguing that. So they're saying there's no right way. Every way is the right way, especially because the Asian religions also promote some of these concepts. So everything is right, everything is good. And our children are growing up. Now when you ask them, for example, about, whether it's the gay rights or whatever, well, their way is right for them. Our way is right for us. There's no problem. They're okay. There's no problem with that. That's what have been instilled in them in schools and so on, to accept the others, instead of accepting the others in love and acknowledging, okay, that's what they're doing, but, that's not according to God, and that's not according to Christ. I'm not going to condone the action. I'm going to love the person. Now I'm supposed and forced to accept the person and accept the act, right? So I'm no longer allowed to say that, for example, I don't agree with homosexuality. I don't agree with, extramarital affairs. I don't agree with genocide. I don't agree with these things. Why? Because to them it's right, right? So why it's wrong to you, that's your problem. Another thing, right, that's important to us to realize, that we are living in a culture today that the majority are setting the rules. It's not a top-down culture anymore. I can, dare to say it's a bottom-up culture. What does that mean? مين النهارده اللي بيمشوا كلامه على الناس? It's the polls, right? It's the numbers. Any politician who wants to make a decision has to be by the polls. Why George Bush was hated? Because he was a man, he had his brain set up in a certain way, and he's going after what he believed in. Not what after the polls were saying, what he believed in. Now you have to check the polls. What do people think about this? If people don't like this, I might as well do what they like. Otherwise, I'm going to lose the polls and so on, right? Even in the church, right? We're seeing a big movement today in churches, right, to agree with the majority. People are saying, okay, gay rights are okay. So the church is going to also say, okay, gay rights are okay. How about the Bible? How about what St. Paul said? How about, the commandments? How about all these things? Yeah, that was for their time. We have to accept what the people are saying. Otherwise, we're going to lose the people. So we're no longer in a culture and in an era where God is setting the rules and the church and people are following the rules. It's now the majority are trying to set the rules and forcing people to follow it, right? Does that sound like a particular church in the book of Revelation? It's called the Church of Laodicea, right? Which is close to it's the last church, right? But we're not going to get into that. Otherwise, we're going to convert it into second coming and so on. So these are the problems that facing our culture today, our society today. This is a problem facing us. If we're still in the workplace, this is problems facing our youth. They're going to college, starting their life. This is a problem facing high schoolers and middle schoolers as well. Okay, and maybe younger, because now the whole rainbow family and TV is a big influence of pushing these agendas into people. So how can we prepare ourselves? Right? How can we provide a rational explanation? As the first verse was saying, let us reason together, says the Lord, right? How can we reason with people that this is not the right thing to do? What is the way to go about that reasoning? Right? Again, we have to believe, yes. Do we ask people to believe? Yes. But to get through the first threshold, for them to consider, to believe, we have to get over these things. If somebody says, first of all, there's no God, how can I talk about them about believing the God they don't see? When science telling them they're brought up and they're educated and their whole foundation in in life is, if you don't prove it, doesn't exist. You have to prove it. Right? Again, not believing in God is easy. And I think a lot of people are doing that just to allow themselves to do what they want. سهل قوي ان انا اقول ما فيش ربنا، عشان لو ما فيش ربنا هعمل اللي انا عايزه. سيبك بقى من الخطيه ومش الخطيه دي، خلاص ما احنا اتفقنا. انا جاي كده صدفه، طبيعه كده بطريقه صدفه، شويه برق على شويه رعد على شويه بروبايوتيك سوب ولا whatever بريبايوتيك سوب، الكلام ده كله انا جيت كده صدفه، واخلاقي دي نتيجه المجتمع اللي حواليا، انا مش مسؤول عن حاجه، فاعمل اللي انا عايزه. خلاص. morality this is just something relative. خلاص. بس من جوه الانسان ما بيبقاش شاعر باي حاجه، ما فيش اي علاقه ليه بربنا، ما فيش اي علاقه ليه في there's something empty inside them. Okay. So some of the problems is people think they cannot reconcile God and science. If you're a scientist, you cannot be religious. You cannot believe in God and be scientist at the same time. If you're going to use your brain, you can't have faith. And if once you believe in something, this means you're not using your brain anymore. Then you're not intelligent anymore. You drop down from the list of intelligent people once you say, I have faith about something, right? How can I reconcile between what my heart wants me to do, to love God and to seek God, and what my brain is telling me that this is what I had to think of, right? So these are the dilemmas that people are having today. And again, that's the first barrier before we get in, right? So what are the areas of apologetics? If we're trying to summarize kida and high big picture, what are the areas that people are, or the stages that we should go with in apologetic, right? The first question is, does God exist or not? في ربنا ولا لا؟ طب how can I prove there's a God? Right? Science may tell me if I don't prove him put him under the microscope, he does not exist. So how can I prove that? How can I argue the existence of God? And let's say we succeeded in the existence of God. Right? We proved that. Yes? Which God is right? Is it Buddha? Is it Christ? Is it the God Muhammad is talking about? Which God is it? Yes? So we have to go around explaining the differences between the different gods and why these gods are false gods and why Christ is the true God. Why these differences? Right? How can we accept this whole picture together? Right? Khalas. I believe there's a God. I believed that Christ is the true God. Now the question is, which Christ to follow? Khalas. There's a lot of churches. Last time I checked, there were like 30,000 different, Protestant denominations. Which one of them is right? Right? So all these things needs to be addressed. Okay. What is blocking people from believing in God in general? Right? What is the issues that are in people's mind? And again, we're not talking about the heart right now. We're talking about the mind that blocking them from accepting who God is, or how to go about proving the existence of God. First thing is called the moral law. What's the moral law? Each one of us have inside them a belief of what's right and what's wrong. Like I tell you today, for example, what ISIS is doing is in Iraq, مع Christians and Yazidis and so on. Is that acceptable or not? Get to anybody, right? Show them the pictures اللي هم بيعملوها, we shoot people and so on and all these things. Is that acceptable or not? They're going to tell you no. Even among the majority of the Muslims may not be. بلاش Nazis, what the Nazis did. طب هنتكلم معلش مع atheists. خلاص بنتكلم مع واحد who does not believe in God. We'll get to the Muslims later. But let's say somebody who does not believe in God at all. We're starting does God exist or لا? This is the concept. واحد does not believe in God at all. Show them these pictures and tell them, is this right or wrong? Wrong. Why is wrong? If you believe in relativism, why is this behavior wrong? Is raping a woman right or wrong? Is killing a child right or wrong? So what is put that right and wrong in your heart? There has to be something external that has instilled these moral laws in us that tells us what's right and what's wrong. What made human rights? What made that a right? If everything is relative, is everything based on instinct, if we're all random creation, if morality is just nothing but a process of evolution, what makes that right and wrong? Right? Can I make it today a new moral law that everybody can go and kill anybody? Like there's a new movie that's coming out that go and at hunting day or whatever, I don't know what that is, but concept is go at night and purge people you don't like. So, that's the natural. What is that natural? Who put that natural law in us? What puts that? What puts all these natural law, what we're calling natural law, and that's the right term for it, or moral law, what puts that in us? Unless it's somebody outside who has that right and wrong, the concept of right and wrong, and had instilled that in us and built in us. But that's, by the way, each one of these topics, that's weeks of discussion. There are books about that and how to go argue about that. I'm just telling the titles of the things that we can use in arguing the existence of God.
So there is another traffic law اللي هو you develop through experience that if you break that law you're going to get consequences.
Just one notice. I'm not going to prove any of these today. This is just teasers كده أو حاجة headlines عشان to get you into what we go about in apologetic, right? But the traffic law is something humans put together, and in England they go on the other way. In the US, we drive on the right. In England, they drive on the left. That makes that right, and what makes that wrong? Nothing. But the moral law is different. Moral law is the same throughout the whole world. So there are books that talks about proving that the moral law must have an external source, and that external source must be God. Another thing, believe it or not, is the biological, facts. Biology. Evolutionists and atheists claim biology to be theirs to prove or disprove God. We as Christians need to use science, need to use something like biology to prove the existence of God. This is an important thing for us to claim back as Christians, to claim science back for us and use science to prove the existence of God. Biology. And there's a lot of books that talks about, again, when we talk about, for example, evolution, we're not going to talk about it, that evolution and contradicting the Bible. We're going to talk about evolution as science and arguing scientifically, right? Why does evolution doesn't make sense? It's not a scientific fact. Evolution, whoever claims evolution is scientific is wrong. And unfortunately, this concept is getting into our churches today that evolution is okay. Unfortunately, people are using terms they do not understand. By definition, people are saying today, in some churches, people are saying God used evolution to create things, right? That term in itself is self-contradicting. Why? The word evolution means random mutation, which means there's no God involved, there's no external, anybody involved. It's just random, something happened completely random. Could have happened, could not have happened, right? Nobody involved in it. Random mutation and natural selection. So if I say God was using evolution, how can something completely random happen and God is using something completely random when God is not supposed to be something of that random? So in our churches, and I hate to say that, in our churches, people are using things that are in itself self-contradicting, right? And they claim to be scientists. Well, we need to argue that from a scientific point of view. Right? Cosmology and the universe and the age of the universe and the whole contradiction, whether it's 6 days or 14.5 billion years, and some of these things we have to also go back to the Bible and show what the Bible is saying about the age of the universe, what the fathers of the church have said about the age of the universe, and look at the science and look at why did God, if he used 14.5 billion years, why did he take that long? If he's God, he can just have done that and the whole universe existed. Why did he take that long to create such things, right? And there's all scientific reasoning behind it, and this science does fall under Christianity. And we can use that science in our favor to, again, explain to people why God did things, right? Another big problem that people are complaining, and they always say, if there's a God, he wouldn't have allowed this to happen, which is pain and suffering. This is a big problem, and it's been dealt with in a lot of books. And we all know the idea is to go and learn these things and see what others have said before, use that and develop it and introduce it to our church, introduce it to our youth, introduce it to our community, so people are equipped to argue with that. And something else, philosophy, we can look at philosophy and how to benefit from that, and how philosophers across the history have always understood that the universe is beyond the capacity of man to understand. Let's say we go back then to proving the existence of God. We prove to somebody the existence of God. Now we come into the issue of Islam, Buddhist, Hindu, Taoism, Confucianism, all the isms in the world, right? What are they? Right? And whether multi-God makes sense, multi-God doesn't make sense, the good and the evil, all these things make sense or not. And then we talk about other religions like Islam, Jehovah's Witness, Buddhism, Jehovah's Witness, Mormonism, and all these things, and how to argue from within their own, content, whether they make sense or not, whether they fit together or not, or do they do self-contradiction, and when they, we bring in their content, do they make sense with what, common logic or not? So all these things needs to be looked at, right? Now, when somebody become Christians, what kind of Christians they become? Christian, Catholic, Orthodox, Protestant, what kind of, church they go to, and so on, and, the differences between the various churches. As you can see, there's a lot of things to learn, a lot of things to study. One person or one group of people cannot be experts in all these things. We need a lot of people to work together. Right? We need a lot of people to specialize in different things. Right? All sorts of people, all educational levels, all ages. No one's allowed to say, nah, I'm too old, or I'm too young, or I didn't study this, or I didn't study that, right? We get the books, we study the books, we read together, we understand, we discuss among ourselves, we develop the arguments between ourselves, and then we try to take that and discuss it with other people and carry this knowledge through everybody. Okay? So this needs to be the church effort. Each one of us, كل واحد فينا عنده different talent and have a different focus in life and different skill in life. And we need to use that skill in the right place to argue the right thing and to bring people in the faith or knowledge of God in different ways. So just as an advertisement, we moved our meeting to Tuesdays to accommodate some of the college people. It's once a month. I brought some of the books that we use, so you can just look at it here if you want. We take a book, for example, and go through it and read it, right? And go through it in details, right? And argue it, and understand what the author is trying to say, and understand what does that mean from a scientific point of view, and then develop our ideas, and then go back, hopefully, and teach that into the classes and the meetings, so we are all equipped into arguing, like, something of the moral law. We read books about it and then come back and discuss it, and hopefully distill that into an hour lecture or something like that, and go in and prove what that is. Okay. And basically that's about it. No, once a month. Yeah, once a month on Tuesday. We need to adjust the time عشان we don't conflict with, I need to talk with you guys, or maybe make it one meeting. إن إحنا نيجي Tuesday نبقى جزء من الميتنج دهوت، نبقى once a month يبقى apologetic meeting، جزء من السيرفيس وبتاع، بس we can discuss that and coordinate that مع بعض later on. But the goal is, if we really think about this in the right way, we need to have like 5 or 6 different apologetic groups. One group was, again, arguing with atheists, and not just arguing with atheists from, scientific point of view, from moral point of view, from whatever. Other group arguing with different, religions. Other group they're arguing with different, Protestants. Like the other day, we had a guy who used to come to church, Protestant guy, born again Christians, and he wanted to come and argue with us about, how come we're not Christians. He was calling us, non-Christians, hell-bound, non-Christians. How to argue with somebody like that and prove to him what the Coptic Church is all about. We need people who are prepared with the knowledge and with the Christian arguments to argue with these kind of people. Right? You have a friend who's an atheist. How can you provide to him material? How can you provide to him, ideas to show him that God does exist? Right? We need a lot of people, a lot of work to focus on these things. Right? One group is not enough. Right? Definitely, 5 or 6 people are not enough. One group is not enough. Maybe we need, 5 or 6 groups focusing on different aspects to help the evangelism group. So evangelists go and bring in the people, and then there are people behind them providing the answers and supporting as needed. Location is St. Mary في البيسمنت، الأوضة اللي جنب الجراديوتس ميتنج اللي هي circular room في البيسمنت. And hopefully we'll talk with the evangelism group, and hopefully we'll be able to work something and maybe combine efforts or something. Anything else?
Is our main target that to prove that the other one is not correct, or to prove that we are right?
The main target, first of all, the main target is to prove to ourselves, to make our faith strong. That's the first purpose. عشان برضو when I hear things from the outside, I'm not confused, number 1. Number 2 is to share with them the news. It's not about forcing them to believe one way or the other. It's not about, if you're not going to believe, you're going to go to hell. I plant the seed. St. Paul says, in Corinthians what? I planted and, somebody else watered, and God is the one who, grew the plants. My job is to provide the message. Whether they receive it or not, whether they accept it or not, God is going to work in them. But if I don't do my job, I'm preventing God from completing the work. If somebody plants a seed and I don't do the watering, the seed is not going to grow. God is not going to be able to make it grow without water. I have to do my job. Right? So it's about me delivering the message. Again, in meekness and fear. Okay? Any other questions?
Can you give us a brief answer to how can I deal with right now I'm in the middle of a situation where
تاخد وقت بس.
situation where I get answer the Big Bang. So don't talk to me.
The Big Bang. What's the Big Bang actually is a wonderful way to prove that God exists. Because it's working fine, Brian. The Big Bang is a great proof, actually, that God exists. I don't know why, as Christians, we're shying away from the Big Bang. Because what does the Big Bang says? The Big Bang says, scientifically, that at the point in time and space, there was no time and space. Okay? So there was no time and space, and out of nothing, out of no time and space, they call it a singularity, came everything. The universe started to exist space started to exist. Time started to exist. This is actually exactly what the Bible says in Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. The Bible, the book that was written 2,000 years ago, is the first book in history that claims that the universe is not eternal. Yes? One of the main concepts that philosophers held throughout time was that the universe is eternal. The Bible came, as Moses says, the universe is not eternal. The universe started to exist at a certain point in time, and this is what science proved today. Guess what, Aunt Mary? Guess what? Today scientists are trying to prove that the universe is eternal. How? They're trying to prove that the universe have been existing in some kind of shape or form, in a different way. And the Big Bang is just one event out of many, and they cannot get out of that the Big Bang is a beginning of time and space. Because once you say the Big Bang is the beginning of time and space, what caused this Big Bang? Where did all this energy came from? Why did all this happen? There's no answer. Scientifically, there's no answer for that. So they're trying to go say well, our universe expands and collapses. So there were periods, this is not just the current incarnation of the universe. No. The universe have been expanding and collapsing, and this is, one of those periods of expanding and collapsing. And again, there's scientific arguments against that one, scientific, right? Or where there's something called the multiverse. There's multiple universes, and we only live in one of them. Well, how can you prove that? Scientifically, there's no proof of that, right? So the Big Bang is actually we have books actually that talks about the Big Bang as a proof of the existence of God. And from the time the Big Bang happened until now, how does that fit with the Bible?
Did you sometimes you feel like it's kind of atheist, especially the atheists, like they know that God exists, but they don't wanna admit it because there is something in their life they don't wanna have a God. A lot of them, be only one kind. But يعني, I felt it when I spoke with people who are atheists. Really, I feel like it's kind of they are just arguing with no basis for their argument. Have you ever met with someone atheist that got convinced with just telling him this theory is this and that and stuff like that? You speak to him in scientific language. Did he get convinced?
Okay, let's not talk about Okay, some of these books were written by former atheists. Right? There's actually in the 40s, one of the major characters in modern apologetic called C.S. Lewis. He is a British author. He was an atheist, and he became a Christian.
But the answer is all the scientists now are atheists.
No, there are scientists who are Christians, and there are scientists who, through science, they started as atheists and became Christians.
I know they don't have any basis.
The atheists definitely don't have any basis, right? But again, the idea here is that it's one-on-one case. You're right. That some people have, somebody like, for example, Richard Dawkins, who's considered to be the bishop of atheism today throughout the whole world, right? He has his own, problems, and his logic. When you sit down and argue with him logically, and there are debates on the YouTube between him and other Christians, you take it from logical point of view. He doesn't have a lot of scientific arguments. This whole thing about the selfish gene and all these things that claims are the reasons behind why we survive and why we exist and so on. If you take it and analyze it scientifically, it doesn't have that. So they have internal other personal issues.
Yeah, that's my question, because
Yes.
I didn't read really books. I just from some internet and stuff like that. My question is, can you prove from the science really that God exists, or God is something spiritual, and they have to open their spiritual eyes to see Him.
Okay, so what apologetic does, what the whole work we do is that the goal is to break the barriers of saying, I can prove scientifically that God does not exist. So the whole idea is to take that argument out. So if I prove that evolution is wrong, scientifically, that argument of that things evolved into the way it is today is gone. Then you have to explain to me, you have to find another explanation from, to justify your atheism is, how did I come to be who I am today? And they cannot. The only crutch they had was evolution. Now we took you can take the crutch away by proper argument, take the crutch away. So now they have nothing to stand on. So, when you argue with them, well, okay, I choose not to believe you. And that's your choice. Don't enforce it on me. That's your choice to be an atheist. Then don't enforce it on me. Don't tell me this is scientific. And that's the battle that we really need to go to. Right? We are, in a way, as Christians, we're afraid to prove, and argue scientifically about this. And these people who wrote, some of these, most of these books are Christians, argue from scientific point of view.
And did they say that the science brought them to be convinced?
Yes, some of them
Science
are. Some
did
of them
that?
are. Some of them were Christians and continued with science to continue to prove God. And some of them were not Christians, and from science, from study, they can understand. They can see that evolution or whatever, cosmology or whatever, leads to this whole thing cannot just happen in a random way. Randomness cannot explain everything we have. And there are actually, books that use, again, mathematical theories and so on, and probability and statistics and all that to show that what's going on, no way can be random. No way. So if it's not random, what else? They're trying to call it intelligent design. They're trying to call it something else. There had to be some external agent that shaped life the way it is today.
I just, because I spoke with doctors. Doctors are atheists. That's very sad. So I just feel like it's easier to convince any other religion or anything by presence of God, easier than having an atheist. Because I know that the atheist, he knows, but inside of him...
But you can't help somebody who chooses not to believe. The only thing, as I said, we can do is provide the argument. God is going to work with that argument later on at the time. We may never experience. We may never see that transformation happening. But we have put our part of the brick that builds the whole picture, and God will use it some other time.
Okay, Mourad, there's 2 points here that I'd like to add. The first one, I'll take you about 50 years ago. When I was in high school, there was a law, they call it the قانون بقاء المادة, اللي هو
conservation of energy, or
conservation
of matter,
of material itself. So that was scientific base for the eternity of materials, not human being or animals, the eternal existence of material. That's number one. Number two, speak of doctors that they are atheists. Can we argue with the person who goes into operation room and he is knocked out or he sleep, and the proof to him that the operation that he went under through with staff and equipment and God knows what, that he didn't go through it at all? It did not happen because he was knocked out.
Yeah.
And also when you sleep, there's millions of things, part of the world, things are happening. Can you go and prove that it did not happen? So, as an example,
yes, there's a lot of. So the conservation of energy or conservation of matter, right? Because matter and energy are interchangeable format, right? E equals mc squared, the famous equation, right? So, true, matter and energy stay, but in what format? Second law of thermodynamics shows that it's going to go into a more chaotic format, not into a more organized format. Right? So that also shows that the way it is today, this is the optimum that's going to be. With time, the universe actually is going to go through a decay process. Don't worry, not tomorrow, not the next year, but in billions of years, the universe is going to go through a decay process, right? And the decay is going to bring in randomness. And actually the universe is going to become cooler and cooler until at certain point, very far in the future, there will be no life and no way to sustain life, right? But if that's the case, right, the argument of the whole Big Bang and this whole presence of universe really doesn't make sense, right? Why does the universe exist at all? Why does anything exist? There's no argument for it. Well, it exists because we're there. Sharif, sorry, can في سؤال قبليك هنا يا شريف لا؟ ممكن Brian, can you help with the mic or mic? Hmm?
Those scientists who adopt this model will eventually lay down a timeline how the universe and when the different galaxies, stars, planets form. And when they lay down this timeline, they always reach a conclusion that stars form before planets. And this simply means sun was formed before the Earth. But from the Bible, we know that the Earth was created on the first day, but the sun was created before.
No, there's no contradiction. And as I said, there are books here that talks about that in details, and going through the 6 days of of creation took us close to 6 months, right? So we're not going to summarize that here. I'll talk with you after that, Sharif, because again, there is this set of books. There was this set of books by a guy named Hugh Ross, who has a PhD in cosmology, right? And he's a great Christian, and he does do a very good job in trying to explain how do these things fit together, right? Unfortunately, I know, Ashraf, you believe in, or you agree with the people who believe in the 6th day of creation and the young earth creationist. I totally disagree with that. With all due respect, I totally disagree with that, because even the church fathers from the beginning acknowledged that the age of the universe is not related to 6 days. Well, not all of them, but then the same thing. Not all of them agreed with the young earth creation. So the only way to go about that is to go to the Bible and go to the science. And again, science is not our enemy, and we cannot ignore the scientific facts. If something tells me that this is what science is saying, and I'm going to say that science is wrong because the Bible is saying, and without really proper understanding of both, I'm going to be put myself in a corner where, again, I'm excluded from existence today because I insist on an image that does not fit science and does not fit the Bible. Right? Let's talk about that later. Okay? But again, that's my personal opinion, right? Our church, the Coptic Orthodox Church, does not have a specific stand on these things. Pope Shenouda, when he was asked about the age of the universe, again, he said the age of the universe, again, is undetermined. Our church is very comfortable with the, 13.5 billion years of the age of the universe. It's not an issue for us because it does not affect anything in salvation. Okay? But he had a question first, yeah. Medhat. He had a question first.
Okay. I'm just making a comment on the atheists who believe in God, but he try to deny it. There is a new kind of atheists. They say God does exist. He created the Big Bang or the world in the beginning. He's like the architect. He put the blueprint for everything. He put the road, and that's it. He's like absentee landlord. Doesn't exist anymore, or exists some other places or different universe, and everything run by whatever rules he put, whatever physical world he put. Now it's running by itself. And this kind of people is very hard to convince otherwise.
True.
They say, why I need God? He already put the plan and it's running. If I'm going to be a bad person, he put that for me in the beginning of my DNA. There is nothing I can change about it.
Well, that's the whole idea behind, free will and the arguments about the free will and going through all this detailed discussion and studies on that.
And
As I
that
said,
group is growing so much.
But-
it's more than atheists, yeah, right.
As he had said, there is God, that's the easy way to go through. It's very easy to talk to him spiritually. Like in the other one, يقول لك no God, and he just did something here تقول له ما تقول له يقول لك no God. That's
okay. All right. But as I said, that we're going to find a lot of varieties, right? One person or one group of people are not going to be able to address all of them. We need a lot of workers. We need a lot of people to study. As you can see, for example, right? Sharif has been doing a lot of great work in, studying and understanding, right? I've been trying, myself, and we have two different opinions because out there's two different apologetic groups, and in the church, as a church, the Coptic church as a whole, there's no specific stand about what is right faith or not, because again, the church is staying away and letting science take its course because science is going to change. 100 years ago, scientists got together and found, a lot of mistakes, scientific mistakes in the Bible. All these mistakes turn out to be scientific mistakes, and when science advanced, science, became different, and the Bible turned out to be correct, and science was wrong. So, whether we come up with different theory tomorrow or not, it's a different situation.
I just want to say, beyond any thinking, there is a religion. There is some spirit behind it, and we have to examine that. So there is no such thing as atheists. Atheists have a religion. Their religion is that they are against God. It's just they don't profess it. They just show it in a term of science because they use the science as a tool. But there is a religion. That's why when you talk to them, they get so mad. If they don't care, if it's for them, it's just science, you shouldn't get mad, you shouldn't get offended. They get mad and they hate everybody who professes there is God. So there is a religion, there is a spirit behind that kind of thought. Any kind of thought, there is a spirit behind it that's supporting. Now they use the science as a tool, as the same way we use the science as a tool to support their original spirit, their original religion that they believe in. That's why they could come tomorrow from one idea to the same idea, but they go like one theory of science to another theory of science, but they go back to the same beliefs, the same thought, that they want to prove that there is no God because for them God is controlling and they want to have a free will that to do whatever they feel. So we have to examine that. That's why it's going to be hard to think of them as just science, because you gotta have to know what they're coming from, wherever it is, because there is a spirit behind them. And that's why even St. Paul said that the God of this universe blind them. So there is a God of this universe that blind people to see the truth.
But that's what Mary was talking about, right? They may have, they may try to believe in God, or they can acknowledge that God exists, but they don't want to believe in Him because believing in Him will mean certain results based on that, and then they have to behave in a certain way and constrain their life into certain aspects and so on. Then becomes a problem, right? Why would I stop, doing what I think, quote unquote, enjoyment, right? As long as He does not exist, I can do whatever I want. Once I acknowledge that God exists, well, that means there's an end of life. There's heaven and hell, and there's all these things. I have to be held accountable.
You're gonna lose control.
I'm gonna lose control of myself, but not knowing that when I submit myself, right, I'm gonna become more free than pretending to be free and living as a slave to sin and desires and so on, right?
Right.
Mary has a...
Thanks, ma'am. Okay, the truth is in our side, so we don't want to be discouraged because the truth is in our side. Everything can be researched and can be proved. God exists, we believe in Him, He created the world, so we want to be empowered to the fact that, yes, we have to do all the research and the reading, but the truth is in our side. So we are the stronger side. Also, we always put the load of proving something on us. There is a way that you get those non-believers to think about what they're saying. They usually just repeat what are in the books and in the media, but they never took the time to reflect and think. And again, it takes a lot of faith to be an atheist. There is a book out there that says, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. So, and I just want to say that also Abuna Dawood Lamai has a lot of books in Arabic on Ilhad. So he put everything now also in small books in Arabic. The book on guard is very good as far as, I think, 3rd or 4th chapter, he teaches the way of asking questions to the extent that he gets that from the Lord Jesus Christ, where when the Jewish or Samaritans were asking him questions, he would answer the question with a question. So this is a way of learning how to have a conversation and reflect or push the proving on the other side. And you're going to see how lost they are, but at least you're going to get them to think about what they say or repeat, or whether they really it makes sense or not. Thank you.
I just like to make maybe one concluding statement, right? Our job is not to make people Christians. That's God's job. That's the Holy Spirit's work, right? No one comes to the Father except through the Holy Spirit, right? Our job is to provide the means by which God can work. We are going to do what we can, but we cannot change souls. We cannot go into somebody's heart and twist it and make it a Christian instead of being an atheist, or make it a Christian instead of being a Muslim or whatever. Our role as Christians is to witness, right? This witnessing provides the means by which God is going to work inside the people's heart and change that, right? Don't think that whatever you're doing, with all due respect to all the effort, right? I'm not saying we stop the effort, but don't think that whatever we're doing, no matter how much we sharpen our arguments, how much we learn, that by these arguments, we're going to convince people to be Christians, right? We are just doing our part, our job of providing the answer and the defense. God's job is going to be to take that work, bless that work, take it in people's heart, change the hearts, and make people believers. And it may not be on your hands. You may never witness how people are changing. Maybe just a pamphlet that you give, maybe just an answer that you give, maybe something that's a comment that you make. God will use that years later or months later to change that person into something different. But if you don't provide that seed, or if you don't provide that mean by which God is going to use it, God is going to use somebody else. But our job is to do our part and let God do the rest. God is going to make things grow. Right? One of the parables is, sower, or the farmer goes to the field, plants the seed, goes home and sleeps, comes later and finds that the plants have grown. How did the plants have grown? He doesn't know. How do plants grow? Okay, we may have a scientific explanation for it, but really, God is the one that makes them, really grow. Okay, the sun, we need the food, we need the water, we need the fertilizers, we need all these things, but God is the one who makes everything grow. Same thing with the spiritual work. You do your job, God is the one who's going to change, God is the one who will make things grow. Okay? Yeah, thanks a lot for your, okay, done.
What's the answer to the many kinds in the revolution?
Sorry?
How does the revolution, I don't have the answer for that. How does the revolution answer, revolution. What did I say? The evolution, I'm sorry. What is the answer? The evolution to the many kinds, the creation of many kinds. Like the evolution that talks about the human being in a, but how about many kinds?
Evolution does not talk only about human beings. Evolution talks about how everything existed, how all life existed out of nothing. Right? The claim to be exist out of nothing, right? And if you study actually what Darwin have said originally, He talked about what we called, micro evolution, right? The small changes that happen, for example, in birds' beaks and so on. And he said, once we prove that, we can extrapolate that based on that, things can change on a larger scale. And hence we can, see that things can become from amoeba or, single cell organisms into multi-cell organisms into creatures and all kind of creatures and so on. So just everything by random. Everything happened to random mutation and natural selection. That's how evolution explains everything in life. It doesn't have any scientific evidence. Right? Okay, thanks a lot for your time, and please pray for us and for the service, and you're welcome to join us.